Today's date, January 15, 2019. And welcome, everybody, as well. Call roll, please.
Dave Line.
Here.
Pyrus de Carvalho.
Here.
Soldner.
Here.
Inskeep.
Here.
Deckant.
Here.
Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Daryl, good morning. You're going to offer prayer for us, right?
Yes, I am.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. Let's pray. Let's wait for John.
Thank you.
You were kind. I didn't wait for him.
Dear Heavenly Most Gracious Father, we come to you this morning. We thank you, Father God, for this is a new day, a new year. And Father God, there's not much to do about the past, but Father, from this day forward, we can make changes, we can modify, we can learn from our experiences. And Father, some are good, some are bad. And Father, we just thank you. That's what the leadership is in this community, and that's what the council members do. They help make the right decisions to help this county, this city, become the best it can be. And Father, we just thank you that this city shall be known as a city of integrity, a city that is productive, a city that cares about people. And I thank you for that today. I pray blessings over the meeting today, and we do all this in the precious name of Jesus. And they all said, amen.
Amen. Amen. Thank you, Daryl. Next item.
Item 4, election of mayor.
All right. I get to step down. Aren't I lucky? Do we have any nominations for mayor?
I move to elect David Inskeep mayor.
Okay. Dave.
Second.
And a second. Any other nominations? Okay. We've got the motion made already, and with a second. Call roll, please.
Dave Line.
Yes.
Pyrus de Carvalho.
Yes.
Soldner.
Yes.
Inskeep.
Yes.
You could abstain. Deckant.
Or vote nay.
Nay, I could have gone the opposite, I guess.
And
And-
Deckant.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right. Dave, it's
And
yours.
I believe we're going to have
Swearing in, that's
swearing
right.
in.
Please raise your right hand and repeat after me. I state your name,
I, David Inskeep,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support the Constitution
that I will support the Constitution
of the United States
of the United States
and the Constitution
and the Constitution
of the State of Kansas
of the State of Kansas
and faithfully perform
and faithfully perform
the duties of mayor,
the duties of mayor,
so help me God.
so help me God. Thank you.
Congratulations.
Dave, congratulations.
All right, I'm on the clock, I guess. Next item, please.
Item 5, election of vice mayor.
Are there any nominations?
Yes, I nominate Jade Pyrus de Carvalho for vice mayor.
And second?
Second.
Anyone? Second. Call the roll, I guess.
Dave Line.
Yes.
Pyrus de Carvalho.
Abstain.
Soldner.
Yes.
Inskeep.
Yes.
Deckant.
Yes.
Next. It's official.
That's swearing in.
Oh, okay. Raise your right hand and repeat after me. I state your name,
I, Jade Pyrus de Carvalho,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support the Constitution
that I will support the Constitution
of the United States
of the United States
and the Constitution
and the Constitution
of the State of Kansas
of the State of Kansas
and faithfully perform
and faithfully perform
the duties of vice mayor,
the duties of vice mayor.
so help me God.
So help me God.
Congratulations, Dave.
Right. Oh, very good. Next item, please.
Item 6, oral communications from the audience.
This is the portion of the meeting where we invite those from the audience that want to visit about something that is not on the agenda. And we ask that you limit your remarks to 5 minutes, and if you will approach the podium and state your name and address as well. Thank you. Looks like Richard. Morning.
Good morning. I'm Richard Graver. I'm the president of the Central Kansas Landlords Association, also board member of the Associated Landlords of Kansas. Obviously, I'm here to talk about landlord issues again. We have a serious problem here with the city's draconian inspection department. Trent Maxwell stated that the only thing a landlord can do is change a light bulb, change a smoke alarm in a battery, or a battery in a smoke alarm, and fix a small hole in sheetrock. We fought this item with the city of Wichita several years ago there, and the judge ruled that a landlord can change a receptacle, change a light switch, change a faucet, and do all of these minor items if they didn't require a city permit. Are we going to have to file suit in the city of Hutchinson to settle this department down, or are we going to have some reasonable things going on here? We're being threatened by this department here with fines and going to jail if we don't paint a house, etc. This is just totally ridiculous. We had a good working relationship with Bob Fairbanks and Diane. The inspection by the department now is, homes that pass HUD are being flunked by this department. Some of it's just totally ridiculous. I know there was one man, I understand it's been resolved now, that was literally threatened to re-side his property when all it needs is some repair. Now, I understand there are some issues on the interior of the property here, which I'm not aware of here, but you pulled the utilities on a 1920s house there because of the concrete foundation. When the man pulled that rental off the market and was going to sell it, he was told that the new buyer would have to bring the house to code before they would put the utilities back on. You know, homes that'll pass HUD's code should be good enough for this city, not this wonderful international property maintenance code. Now, I'm going to get a little personal on one here. John, you continue to use the tragic death of that young man in a fire here and blame the landlords. It wouldn't have mattered if that house had passed inspection in flying colors. The cause of the fire was them illegally using an extension cord, borrowing electricity from the neighbor. That's what caused the fire, not the landlord. There have been no deaths in a basement fire in Hutchinson because of no egress windows. There was one entire family lost here in a basement fire that had 2 means of egress because they didn't have smoke alarms. 5 people have been killed because they couldn't get off the 2nd floor of a burning 2-story house because there was only 1 means of egress. 1 of those was a rental. The other 4 were owner occupied. I'm just asking, apply things equally. Get on the homeowners. There's houses in this town that are falling apart, owner occupied, and you're doing nothing.
Thank you, Richard. Anybody else want to speak to that matter in the audience at this time? If not, I think I would invite Trent to hear the other side of the argument, if I could, please.
Sure, absolutely. Trent Maxwell, building official for the city. I don't know where the facts are coming from because they're completely false.
Oh.
Landlords know they can do roofing, siding, windows, doors, sheetrock, so it's not repairing, patching, things that was mentioned before. Specifically to the receptacles, yes, technically they cannot replace a receptacle. We know what happens. We're not out there trying to police receptacles, but the case that was brought up was a case that we have an active open case on. So because we're in there inspecting, we're going to make sure the licensed contractors responsible for the work are doing the work. But we are not going to go around to all the rentals and find out who replaced a receptacle here and there and start writing people up. But this is an open case based on a complaint from the tenant, and the code does clearly state that landlords, or going back to what's exempt from of a permit, that receptacles are not exempt. So I have a list of all of this if you want it. A couple cases that are open currently, one is one that is either owned or managed by Richard Griever. He's also made complaints on other properties that we have 11 active cases on. So we're not picking on the landlords. We are open to inspecting and writing up cases, whether owner occupied or otherwise. The cases or the properties that he complained about, I don't know if they're owner occupied, I don't know if they're rentals, but we did actively go out and inspect them. And out of, I think, 13 complaints from him, 11 have cases on them. So if you guys have any other questions about this, I'm willing to speak on those or do my best to answer those questions. Or if you want copies of the cases that were mentioned or alluded to, I've got copies of those as well.
Trent, as clarification, when you say that a case is open on 11 properties, that means a person, Richard, made a complaint about the state of the property.
Correct.
And they
And
were
our-
found to be deficient, and so now they're being required to fix them up.
Correct. Yep.
Okay.
If a house passes HUD inspection, might it not pass city issues?
I can't speak on what HUD inspects. When we did our evaluation for the rental program, I did compare with what their standards were, and they did not meet the standards of the property maintenance code. They were more relaxed. On the house he mentioned with the foundation, I'm not sure which property specifically he's talking about. We've had several this year where the foundations have totally failed. And if HUD passes that, then I would question that inspector's integrity, that inspector's professional expertise, because any structural failure with foundation should not pass any inspection. So again, I don't know which property, so if I did, I could look up what the cases were where we failed it and HUD passed it. But we've had several where the walls just flat out have failed.
So it could be a case where possibly it passed HUD inspection and
Absolutely.
and wouldn't pass ours, and maybe a foundation might be an example of that.
Yes, I would think it's a possibility for sure. He obviously knows of one instance. I don't know specifically what the address is, or I would have made that case, copies of it, and handed it to you.
Let's see, it's been about 2, maybe 3 months or so ago. The Housing Commission recommended, and the City Council supported, kind of the unwritten policy of when you're going out for inspection, if you happen to next door to see some issues, to follow up on those rather than wait for a complaint. Has that had any impact on what your department is doing?
Well, we have plenty of cases, both owner-occupied and rentals. So for us, it's been, I don't know if it's increased a whole lot. I do know of cases that we're dealing with every week that are owner-occupied. Met with one homeowner yesterday that was not a rental, that we do have an open case on that had significant problems. So this year, our goal is to try to get through our rentals per what the Landlord Association wanted and the Housing Commission, trying to get all those rentals inspected. So we are putting a lot of effort there to get that complete, since this is our last year for that program. But as we see deficient homes that we can't or don't want to wait on because of such a disrepair, we are addressing those owner-occupied, or if they're rentals, whatever they are, we're writing cases up for those too. So, but if it's minor, we're gonna put our focus on the rentals. So, for this year.
You referenced when you first began speaking something about a list, I would be interested in seeing that. I don't know if it's something you've got right there, or you have copies for everybody.
I just made one, but you guys can
Okay.
pass that around if you want. And then the other copies I have just are on the code, showing what's exempt, if you want that. And then cases, I didn't know which cases were going to be mentioned today, so I made a couple copies of 2 different cases that I thought were part of the discussion. So,
But to be clear, it isn't the city's position that we're going out and trying to target landlords who have a few properties and they're trying to fix them up without using licensed workers.
no, so on a complaint, we're in there dotting the I's, crossing the T's. So we're going to know and want to know who's doing the work and make sure that they're following code as prescribed. If it's landlords out there on their own doing stuff, usually probably 90% of the time we don't know about it unless it's so significant that it requires a permit, and then we're going to be involved with whatever that project is.
Okay.
Yeah. If that answers it.
No, it does. I really appreciate that. I think there's a lot of fear mongering going on. I don't think you are anti landlord or anti rentals.
No,
I
just
think
this-
there's just that's the narrative being told today, and I don't think that's the case.
It's not. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to actually live up to what Housing Commission and the landlords in our last discussion we had with the rental registration program. We waived the fees for this year. All the landlords that were present that spoke, they wanted their so-called money's worth for the program and felt that that inspection needed to happen. They needed to not be charged for it. And so, yeah, are we putting extra effort this year to the rentals? Yes, and that is the exterior inspection of every rental, and that is to conform to what the landlords and the Housing Commission wanted, which is all those rentals to be inspected at least once. So short of that effort, no, we're not trying to isolate landlords. We're trying to fix up properties by what City Council adopted back in 2011, which is the Property Maintenance Code, which we adopted the 12 from which before that was the 2003 Property Maintenance Code. We kept all the same exemptions and modifications that all the different committees and groups met on back before the first adoption. So we haven't changed or altered anything from what everyone voiced their opinion on back in 2011. So things haven't changed, they're the same. But when people complain, such as the list you have before you, we go out, and whether it's a landlord that complained on 13 properties or a homeowner, we try to see if the complaint's legitimate. If it is, we write up a case on the property.
I guess the key to me would be that I know you guys work very diligently within your department to make sure that you've got consistent interpretation of the code itself, that you're not receiving mixed feelings from different groups that would alter not being consistent with your interpretation.
Well, one benefit of that, we have one inspector dealing with all these properties. And so if he is interpreting something one way, and usually we talk every single day about different cases, so they know what my interpretation of that code is before they apply it, or even after they've applied it. And if something's wrong or something, they'll change it. But we do have one inspector dealing with all these cases, so you're not going to get John says something, Dave says something else.
Right.
That's not going to happen. Now, on the comment of jail time fines, those are all dictated by code, by the court system. So Class C misdemeanor, the judge will state all that when you go to your arraignment. Do you understand how you plead? Do you understand that this is, you know, up to, and Paul could speak more specifically about this, but up to, so whether it's $500 in a fine, up to so many days in jail, that's just because you're in the court process. It's not that we are dictating that, it's the courts dictating it.
Dictating, yeah, right.
With regards to, Mr. Griever mentioned that there was a group, a misunderstanding, if you will. I think it was about citing, but that has since been resolved. Where did that misunderstanding come from? Was that a misinterpretation of?
That, I don't know that there's a misunderstanding now. The code says you need to maintain the exterior of the structure. If you've got places of rot or deteriorated sashes or framing around the window, then yeah, you're probably going to have to replace that wood. If it's siding and the siding's missing places, then there's going to be new places you're going to have to put in. If it's simply paint that's peeled or chipped, yeah, you can scrape it and paint it. We don't care how you get there, whether it's replacing it with new siding or you're painting it, but you can't go paint something that is totally rotted and outlived its life.
No, I think that's a point of fact that sometimes people want to just say things that aren't true. And in the case, and this is some of the pictures, the individual was never told he had to re-side the whole house. It's a piece of siding that needed to be replaced, and it's just a patch. But yet we can tell stories that it was $15,000 to...
For a siding quote or something.
And it probably was for the whole house. Okay. But we didn't require that. So, and that's a conversation I've had with this individual that owns this property.
I see.
So,
Trent, I know that, excuse me, from time to time, there are reports to the Housing Commission about numbers of rentals inspections, how many may have been cited or those kind of things. I wonder if that's something that you could, yeah, and granted we have access to it, but if you could share with us possibly whatever kind of routine report, I'm not asking for a special report,
I'm
Maybe
not
s-
obviously prepared for that today,
No,
but
I didn't expect
each
it now.
month I get a monthly report from our staff of how many rentals are inspected, how many complaints were made, how many property maintenance codes were opened up, which means whether rental or owner occupied. So we could pull those stats or datas. Now, specifically, if they want to know, or if you guys want to know what the actual code violation was, you have to dive into that case a little bit more to find that information. But as far as numbers, we can provide numbers for you.
If you would, next time you do a routine report, you might just, whether it's in the packet or copy us by email, that kind of thing. And if we want some follow-up, we can ask for it.
Sure.
And alluding to what John mentioned, saying something doesn't make it fact. So I encourage people, if they feel that something sounds completely outrageous or the city is being draconian, reach out to us personally. Reach out to John. Get the facts before getting all worked up, because you might be receiving some inaccurate information. And if that information is in fact accurate, we as a council want to know about it, because things need to change. So I would appreciate that.
And if the individual with the siding literally heard that he had to replace the whole siding, may not have been what was articulated, but that's what he heard, then we need to do better about communicating as well.
And I think probably what's verbalized in the field or upon communication with the landlord is you need to fix your siding. Your siding is
that can be broad,
horrible
Yeah.
or in disrepair or whatever. Now, how they interpret that,
Right.
again, sure, would I love every house to have brand new siding?
Sure.
Yeah. Do I care? No. It's, if you have to replace 20% of the siding, replace 20% of the siding, paint the rest. I don't know. Every house is going to be different to what that need is. But the end result is that it's maintained again. Hopefully will last another 10, 20 years before having to replace or do something significant to it other than paint.
I kind of want to second the message Jade expressed likewise. I think that we might be able to answer some questions or get a little closer to what is actually happening in terms of two sides of a story, and hopefully be able to work through some things. And if there's some change that needs to be made, then so be it, that too, definitely.
And that's valid. This might require some particulars because every situation is unique. So you can't just say with regards to siding, but with regards to this home's siding. So wonderful. Thank you. Thank you.
You want your paper back, Trent?
You're fine.
Okay.
It'll find its way back. Anybody else on this matter or any others? If you'll state your name and address, please. Thank you.
My name is Bill Sykes. I live at 108 Roadrunner. I'd kind of like to speak a little bit about this problem. I have the perception, and I don't know if it's accurate because I've only been back here about 3 years since I left for the Army years ago. But the difference, the thing that bothers me is the difference between HUD standards for getting a mortgage and International Property Maintenance Code. I'm certain, reasonably certain, that U5 did not read that code in its entirety, that someone hopefully went through it all, and someone hopefully said, well, we kind of need to take this out, or we kind of need to ignore this, or we kind of need to modify this. But I don't get the feeling that that may have happened. I think that there's been a lot of, well, we'll just take the easy way and we'll adopt this book in its entirety by just passing a motion. And it hasn't been looked at well enough.
Well,
There's a lot of, I don't want to say stupid things in the International Property Maintenance Code, but there's certainly a lot of things that don't make a difference. And proposing municipal fines, municipal court summons, or jail time because there's something stupid in that code that someone has chosen to enforce. doesn't make sense. And I think that you five are responsible for what your inspection department does. And maybe you need to take a little closer look at what the inspection department is doing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Oh, go ahead, please.
Kellyanne Lanham, 2904 Tartan Trail. I am on the Housing Commission and a property manager, and the Housing Commission has actually created a group that our first meeting is today at 3, and it is Code Enforcement Evaluation Committee. So we will be working on streamlining codes and helping with education and stuff. So I just wanted to make you guys aware that the Housing Commission did see a need to work on this, and a committee has been put together, and our first meeting is today at 3.
Wonderful.
And we thank you for your service.
That might speak to some of the items that you were mentioning.
I would just comment, and I don't remember what year the code was adopted.
It was before we were all on
2011.
council. Yeah.
And I can assure you, or this gentleman, that code was read word for word by landlords, by property owners, by, I can remember hours of meetings going through specific details, because the code isn't that long. This isn't the federal government where it's a 2,000-page bill that nobody read. So I would disagree 100% with what the gentleman said, because that code was vetted very good. I think there were some things I remember that we amended out of that code at the time. So what he's saying is just not correct. This council, I don't believe any of you were on at that time, but we've had this room full of landlords before on other issues. Can you imagine adopting that code and not having that group involved in that conversation? So just wanted to make sure that's clear, that in no way did that code get adopted without being properly vetted by a lot of eyes, and not just the council, not just the inspection department, but landlords, property owners, what have you. So,
Yeah, to add to that, in 2011, and Richard has been around long enough, he was probably in those meetings. Tons of meetings happened at the library here. The whole entire code has been stripped, if you will, and revised, whether they didn't like the word and it was changed to or. They didn't like the word deadbolt, that was changed to a locking device or something else. It was cut up to fit the needs of every person that voiced their concern about that code. And when we adopted the 12, we kept all those same amendments, so it didn't ruffle any feathers, it didn't act like we were just going to flip the script overnight and change it. So we kept all the same amendments. So it's completely inaccurate. I do have, if you want to see why we have codes and what we're out there inspecting and trying to do, because I feel like they keep using or thinking of the term like nitpicking, or like we are being over aggressive. And I have 2 cases of photos. If you want to look at those, I did make copies for you. If not, I can save them and give them to you later.
I'll look.
I take it.
Yeah,
You've got
let's
copies.
let, I mean, if you've got them, let's look at
We're
them.
talking about it.
The other thing I wanted to mention or respond to, whether or not we were the body personally that approved the codes, I'll accept the responsibility that you mentioned, and I think Jade commented to that when she invited or made the comment about inviting contact with us. I'm not sure if we're talking the same thing. I recall when the International Property Maintenance Code was adopted, I recall attending at least one or more of those meetings. And it certainly was and I attended both as a homeowner and a landlord at that time. And as a landlord spoke in favor of that. That was my particular position at least, and remains that way. But I do remember those meetings, and certainly all of us at the public had an opportunity, and that preceded my being on this council, to speak at that time. The other thing that I wanted to mention, and not that it's specifically created, but I think that the recently brought to existence again Board of Trades could be a mechanism as well. I think the Code Review Committee that Kellyanne mentioned is probably a better level to begin at, but certainly the Board of Trades is in existence. I think it's just getting started again this month, so I wouldn't inundate it right off the bat, but could be an element as well to use along with the Code Enforcement Committee that the Housing Commission's put together.
And I would encourage anybody who has
particular items in the International Property Maintenance Code that you deem ridiculous, to have that conversation with the evaluation committee so it can be discussed and see if that is right for our community. Because I think that we did strip, again, we weren't part of that process, but I do remember the community conversation, and a lot of things were taken out of there to right-size it for our community. Not to say there aren't other things that could be amended, but there needs to be that communication. It's not enough to just complain about it. Complain about it to the people who are bringing the recommendation to the council, and let's try to get something done about it so that we can have a better relationship here and actually make progress instead of just be upset and divisive. So.
Well, and I think that's what's happening, and I appreciate those of you that came and stood up, and I'm just happy to hear there's a mechanism in place that's going to look at these items. So I think this is the communication that we were looking for, and we just have to stay on top of it, and like I said, keep the lines of communication open both ways, so that we know which ones, to coin the term, ridiculous or not, and the reasoning behind those. I'm very confident that everything in the book was put in there because something happened somewhere, but is that applicable in Hutchinson? And that's what we need to review. So I appreciate you coming in and voicing your opinion, and I'm very anxious to see the outcome of the conversations going forward. Anybody else with regards to this matter or another? It's not on the agenda. Okay, thank you. Next item.
Item 7, consent agenda.
Sir,
I just wanted to comment. I noticed in the one item, the approval of lease agreement with Salt Hawk Archery. John, I'm not sure who to comment to, but appreciate the effort by staff. And I know that we did have a modest but increase in the rental agreement there, and so appreciate that.
And I think we do have representatives here from that group, but it is on a consent agenda with the $250 annual fee.
Right.
So
there are individuals here, you say?
I believe so, but I'm not sure they want to talk. We've had a conversation, but yeah.
Okay. Did you want to visit about that item?
I don't think there's any use to.
Okay.
So it was, I do have a question.
You need to come up.
Oh, would you mind? I apologize. Thank you.
I apologize.
Oh, you're good. You're good.
This isn't something I do every month.
Yeah. Hey, I'm new on the job in this too. I should have invited you
2
out.
months in a row for you, though, isn't it?
Yes, it is. So I'm getting there. Travis Wolf, 7 Meadow Lark Lane.
Thank you.
And I am a representative of the Salt Hawk Archery Club. And that's what I was wondering. Did the $250 was it? Is that what's going to be for next year now?
That's what's in the agreement that's before the council right now.
Oh, okay. I misunderstood. I thought that was what you guys had already said it, that it was going to be $250.
Yeah, and that's one thing, when we talked about this last month, we just kind of let it stand, and we didn't really get a clear direction.
I honestly thought that somebody was going to contact us and we was going to actually have a conversation, but.
Well, we actually had a conversation with
Mr. McAllister.
Yeah, and so, and I explained to him to be on the agenda today, and that it did have the $250 in it, but that's entirely up to the council. It was $1 before. I think we proposed $500 at the request of the council. And we've got it down to $250 now, and so we just need to make a decision.
And now, is that going to be? Is it proposed that that's a year-by-year lease, or is that a 5-year lease, or how are we?
I think it's annual.
It's an annual lease.
An annual lease, year by year. Okay.
Yeah.
I would imagine, other than the change in the
amount,
lease fee amount, that other elements of the lease agreement would remain the same unless one party or the other had pursued changing those.
Mr. Yoder downloaded the new contract. I went through it. There's really not hardly any changes into it other than the amount. So, I mean, it's pretty much what we've always had.
That's what I would expect.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other commentary on the consent agenda?
I would move to approve the consent agenda and authorize the mayor to sign.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Please call the roll.
Deckent?
Yes.
Daveline?
Yes.
Soldner?
Yes.
Pyros de Carvalho?
Yes.
Inskeep.
Yes. Next item, please.
Item 8, public hearing to consider the issuance of taxable industrial revenue bonds for Afia Partners LLC.
I would move to open the public hearing.
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded. Call the roll, please.
Deckent?
Yes.
Dave Line?
Yes.
Soldner?
Yes.
Pyrus de Carvalho?
Yes.
Inskeep?
Yes.
Angela Richard, Director of Finance. Afia Partners LLC is proposing the issuance of $4.5 million of taxable industrial revenue bonds for the purpose of acquiring, renovating, and equipping property for the use of Genzada Pharmaceuticals. As a condition, the IRS requires that this be approved either by voter referendum or approved by officials after a public hearing. Notice was provided in the Hutch News on January 9th. We mailed notice letters to Reno County and the Hutchinson School District as required. We also mailed notice letters to the Hutch Library and Hutchinson Community College. The issuance of the industrial revenue bonds causes no liability to the city. We are just a conduit to the debt, and no expenses will be incurred by the city. So now we must conduct the public hearing. Sarah Steele from Gilmore Bell, who Afia Partners has been working with, is here if you have further questions.
Very good. Any questions from the council?
Kind of a routine thing that we do from time to time.
Right.
And I think the key element is that we're just a conduit or a pass-through, so.
No liability on our part if anyone defaults or anything.
We might take a moment to review
What it is.
what
What it
we're
is.
proposing in terms of the incentive package as it relates to the property tax exemption component, because that has a fiscal impact, and I think it needs to be openly communicated in terms of what is being proposed.
Okay. My next memo that
Oh.
goes over the resolution
Okay.
covers that, so
All
we'll
right, I'm
just skip
sorry.
forward to that.
Okay.
So as part of this, they will apply to the Board of Tax Appeals for property tax exemption, and then they would have a pilot payment, a payment in lieu of tax for 10 years in the amount of $70,000 a year. That was calculated based on what the building is assessed currently. So that's how they came up with the $70,000. Are there additional questions
So what that means
regarding
is
that?
the city will be receiving that 70,000 revenue, which is essentially the current level of property taxation.
I believe the 70,000 is distributed among all
Distributed among the
taxing
taxing
entities.
units.
Oh, okay, well,
It's
yeah,
the
you-
tax
Still.
liability.
you're right.
Right.
You're right. And it's the improvements that they receive the break on, and after 10 years, and that tax
Then everything.
will go up. Which
Yeah.
basically means if nothing happened to the building, we'd be receiving this, and with this project going on, then 10 years down the road, we'll see an increase in the tax receipts on that structure.
Exactly.
I don't want to speak certainly for the company, and in no position to do so, but I think for the benefit of the general public, it's important to understand that, first of all, this proposal reflects that we're not removing anything off of the tax rolls, that they will be stabilized for a period of 10 years as part of the community's expression of support for the company wanting to invest $4.5 million in that corner of 30th and Plum and create wonderful new jobs in that project over the next 3 to 5 years. So I think there's a fairness to this. I think that's the way I view it, in that we're not subsidizing anything. We're simply stabilizing it and providing some certainty to the company for a 10-year period as a new company.
I guess if you want to look at it in alternate means, I know that particular property had lowered their evaluation, so it's not going to lower it either. No, it won't go up, nor will it lower it.
That's
So
right, it's
the
stabilized.
certainty for both parties.
Right,
Yeah,
for
absolutely.
both parties, right.
So.
Yeah.
All right. It is a public hearing. Is there anybody else that would like to speak on the matter at this time?
Seeing no one, I will move to close the public hearing.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Call the roll, please.
Deckent?
Yes?
Dave Line?
Yes.
Soldner?
Yes.
Pyrus de Carvalho?
Yes.
Inskeep?
Yes. Next item.
Item 9, consider resolution regarding the issuance of taxable industrial revenue bonds on behalf of Afia Partners.
Angela Richard, Director of Finance. After the public hearing, the next step is to approve the resolution advising the ability or advisability of issuing the industrial revenue bonds to this project, and also authorize the agreement for the pilot. So in this agreement, we will become the leaseholder. Afia Partners LLC will become the leasee. After they have paid off the industrial revenue bonds, we will deed back the property to them. No bond payments will be made by the city. Again, we have no expenses with this. We have no liability to pay the debt. We went over the pilots, so staff recommends approving the resolution for the advisability of the industrial revenue bonds, and also authorizing the mailer to sign the agreement for the pilot.
Any additional conversation?
I think John covered it well in terms of explaining what's happening and the benefit to the city in the long term, and certainly that particular piece of property.
Mr. Mayor, one thing I wanted to, I forgot, my apologies for getting this in the packet, but as a part of any IRB, we're required in property tax to do a cost-benefit analysis. That's been completed, and I didn't prepare copy the whole deal, but the important part is what the return on investment, and this is a positive return, and that's something we always look at on any of these projects, and I failed to get that in the information. But that gives you just a snapshot of what the benefit to cost ratio is, not only for the city, but for the county, 308 college, the library as well. So
this cost benefit analysis, is it conducted by
and that's the third party.
Third party.
Yeah.
Okay.
This one was Municipal Consulting LLC. I don't know if they out of Wichita or
Pittsburgh.
Sure.
Please.
Great, thank you. Sarah Steele, Gilmore and Bell out of Wichita. The Municipal Consulting is a company out of Pittsburgh, Kansas, and they have done these cost-benefit analyses for many, many cities throughout the state. And so he's got the program and puts that together. It meets the statutory requirements. And as Mr. Deardoff mentioned, it does show a good positive ratio of benefits to costs on all of the taxing jurisdictions. I might also just add that I have been working with Tyler Ellsworth, the bond counsel for the city, and so just wanted to assure you that we've incorporated his comments as well in this resolution that you have before you.
All right, thank you.
Very good.
Thanks,
Thanks so much. Yeah, take a moment, obviously, to look at it, but it seems pretty obvious that the benefit to cost ratio numbers look favorable. If they weren't, I'm sure it wouldn't be in front of us.
Well, considering that, I would move to approve the resolution of the governing body of Hutchinson, Kansas, determining the advisability of issuing taxable industrial revenue bonds for the purpose of financing the acquisition, renovation, and equipping of a commercial facility located in Hutchinson, authorizing execution of related documents, and authorize the mayor to sign.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Please call the roll.
Deckent?
Yes.
Dave-Line?
Yes.
Soldner?
Yes.
Pyrus de Carvalho?
Yes.
Inskeep?
Yes. Thank you, both. Next item, please.
Item 10A, consider Human Relations Commission staffing proposal.
Very good.
Mayor and Council, I'll start off and make a few comments, and then I'll ask Council Member Deckett and Mayor Inskeep to follow up because they've been involved in this. But over the past several months, the mayor at the time, Steve Deckett, and Vice Mayor Dave Inskeep, myself, we've been meeting with the Human Relations Commission going back probably, I think, in September, and really just talking about the future direction of the commission. Specifically, we talked a great deal about the need for staffing that office. Of course, you all know the history of that. That's been talked about for the past 10 years. We then had a joint study session with the City Council and the Human Relations Commission back in November. And from that meeting, then the mayor at the time and Vice Mayor and myself put together a proposal that proposed limited staffing for that office as well as some annual operating funds. And we presented that to the Human Relations Commission on December 19th at their regular meeting. There was a lot of conversation, a lot of discussion at that time. And the HRC, the Human Relations Commission, actually voted 6-2 to support the proposal. And the details of that proposal are in your packet there. That would be roughly a half-time job position that would basically staff the HHRC, would provide leadership and outreach and community education, provide intake on complaints, and provide mediation services if needed, and then help with the guiding a complainant through the process at the state level if it got to that, along with some, I think we proposed $5,000 of annual operating funds for outreach efforts that they might do in the community. And so the HRC voted 6-2 to support that proposal, subject to some discussions that we would have probably at their meeting tomorrow about the job description, specifically what would that would entail. And I think we've got a pretty good job description. It's really based on the former position, a few tweaks here and there. And so we're estimating the fiscal impact anywhere from $50,000 to $60,000. And again, that's a part-time 20-hour position plus just staffing the office and then some of the outreach efforts as well. So that's really just a quick overview of a lot of conversation, a lot of discussion to get us to where we're at today. And I would open it up if Councilman Deckett or Mayor Inskeep have anything to add, so, or any questions from the council.
And I was going to say, Steve, if there was anything you thought of that he missed, great overview. Thank you.
No, I don't think anything's missed. Yeah, I think it's one of those things where we've wrestled and struggled with it for quite some time, years in some ways, but certainly specifically over the last 3 to 4 months. And my feeling, at least, that this is probably the best we can do in a rather than all or none for somebody or everybody type of thing. I think one of the other big elements, I'm not sure it's mentioned in the memo to us. No. And Jade, you were at the study session. Nancy, so were you. But it'll give us an opportunity to evaluate what do we see happening now that we have not a full-time but a half-time position, and what sort of need, what comes up. And either we'll find that it's on target, or maybe not that much is needed, or maybe more is needed. But we'll have some actual experience with having that position. That doesn't address in the fashion that some in the community and on the Human Relations Commission would like to see. But I think that with the 6-2 vote, I think it was felt that it makes a pretty significant step in that direction.
I think it's going to be essential to have data as we go through this.
Right.
And I appreciate your point, Steve, about evaluation. Because if we don't know what the actual numbers are, we can't begin to make a viable decision. So, quarterly at least.
And I think that's an excellent point. I don't think we've got good data from, I mean, people throw out a lot of numbers, and there's really no good data to really rely on. So I think that's critical going forward.
Yeah, I mean, we don't need to know nitty-gritty details, but we do need to know general categories, decisions, impact, et cetera. So figuring out that data piece is going to be key.
I might just mention that it's tricky, like you said. When you start a new position, I think there will be a ramp up of sorts on the marketing and outreach and education to the community that this position even exists, or that there's somebody at the city that they can reach out to. So I wouldn't want to make a decision too quickly based on, you know, what's happening in the first quarter or the second quarter. And really outside of the complainant issue, I think that the value of this position on the education and outreach side can't be minimized. I think that we're going to see a lot of value in having somebody at the city who's focused 100% on race relations, regardless of the complaints. So I just want to caution us to make a decision on the value of the position too quickly based on number of complaints. Especially, it's difficult for people to put themselves out there and complain anyway. So it's going to take some time to earn the trust of people.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you're looking at least a year,
Well,
possibly more,
absolutely.
before you can actually make a final determination.
And there was conversations about that, you know, obviously there will be evaluations throughout the year, but especially at the end of the year, but by no means would that year necessarily dictate the vitality of the
Right.
program or whatever. It needs to be evaluated throughout, but we didn't want to put an artificial deadline that says, well,
No.
1 year we'll know our answer. Well, no,
No,
I don't
you're
think
not.
so.
That's
Yeah.
great.
And I would hope that we will see an effort in the business community to look at their practices and policies, and hopefully if they need to do training, then they get started down that road as well. So it's not just us.
For sure. So John, if this position is approved, commission meets later, finalize the job description, and then that person would be housed here.
Here's, yeah, City Hall. And I think that's something that has come up from time to time, and, you know, it's always been, it was housed here before, and there didn't appear to be problems going back then, but some question that. And if there's issues with confidentiality, I mean, there's always the option to meet off-site for a meeting. I mean, this officer is going to be flexible to do all that if that's a concern. But I mean, people just need to know where to go. I mean, that's
Yeah.
we can't hide it in some building somewhere. It needs to be where people know where it's at. And
Yeah.
you know, and like I said, going back in the history of this, when it was first appointed, it was always a position that was part of the city, part of City Hall. So
I'd also like
that's
to
a plan.
mention it's going to be an evaluation process, again, data driven, that will dictate, you know, what it may need. We may find that it is required that it be off-site or something. I'm not suggesting that's the case, but as we go along, we'll find out more about it. I mean, John and Steve did a great job of putting together a job description, but I think that could use some crafting as well, based on some communications I've had with others. So we'll know. The fun part, should it be adopted, fun I use loosely, is then the actual hiring process. And there was a lot of discussion about that too. We are very, very anxious, should we go forward with this measure, to get an individual in there. But we need to be very cautious and diligent about who we get in there so that it is the right individual. But don't misinterpret that as us dragging our feet if we go forward with this. But I think this is a very great example where you want to be slow to hire, quick to fire, so to speak. Make sure you get the right individual with the right tools that can adequately fill the position.
Yeah, because you're after a fairly specific skill set.
Indeed.
So.
And I'm anxious once we, again, getting ahead of myself, but if this does proceed, if the job description, how many applicants, what it looks like, is the pay adequate, are the hours appropriate, you know, we're just going to have to feel it out as we go along.
Jay, to follow up to one of your comments, and I think we've just recently brought on board a public relations communication staff member, and I think the timing is good in that regards with the need on the education outreach and the, working together with that person. So I think timing-wise is good.
Yeah.
I'd like to move that we approve hiring a human relations officer on a trial basis for 2019 at 20 hours per week.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Please call the roll.
Deckent?
Yes.
Dave
Do we
Blind?
want
Yes.
to give time? Do we want to
Sol-
give? It's just a suggestion that maybe give public opportunity for public input.
Very good. And forgive my lack of procedure. I'm new on the job. I do.
It'll last you for a little while.
It will. I do apologize. Is there anybody in the audience today that would like to contribute to the conversation? I apologize for getting over that part. Please. Great. Thank you. See, it was worthwhile. And if you'll state your name and address, if you would, please.
Sure. My name is Miriam Kitson. I live at 7 Sunflower Avenue. Forgive me, I get terribly nervous at any sort of public speaking, especially if I don't have any kind of prepared remarks, which I do not. So, I was present at the last Human Relations Commission meeting. I am not on the commission, but I was present to observe and understand. And I have a lot of feelings about the current proposal. I do agree that there is a great amount of value in a budget for outreach and education, and that is a wonderful step forward. I do understand that with restricted budgets, a foot in the door is good. I, however, worry greatly from some of the amendments from the original position that will be going forward to a part-time position, if I'm understanding them correctly. As I understand it, several qualifications were removed to make it more available for a part-time position to take on, including education, experience. There was no diversity statement in the job overview, which I understand is still up for discussion and debate, but I think that needs to be taken into serious consideration. And these were all things that other people have mentioned, and I am present to bring it up.
Thank you.
I wish I were so well thought that I thought of it myself. So those are definite things that need to be taken into consideration. Also, it is my understanding that there is a way to get those numbers that you'd like. It's called a disparity report, and this can be used, done using labor through a place such as the Wichita State University, which oftentimes students will do this labor for experience. And so it is not necessarily cost prohibitive to get those numbers. A part-time position, and I do understand the difficulty after so many years, but a part-time position after nearly 10 years of no position feels personally hollow. And it feels hollow because if for 10 years there has been nothing, and then there's a part-time position whose abilities are restricted. It's my understanding that this part-time position does not have the ability to investigate, and is very much, it seems, maybe I'm misunderstanding, but it seems like they're a filing clerk. They're to file it with the state. So if I do not have a computer, I can go to them and ask them to put it in, or I can go to the library and do it myself. And I do not see a great deal of trust. Why would I do that? Why am I going to go complain to you? You can't do anything. You still can't do anything, and you're only there part of the time. And after 10 years, you're going to get kind of a reputation as why would I go there? They can't do anything. And a part-time position may not inspire the type of confidence to receive those complaints. And my concern is that we will not be able to find someone really able to do the job with who would actually have the qualifications for so little pay. I wouldn't come here and spend my time on that, especially not if I had a family to keep together or had, larger goals or ambitions or wanted to do things like vacation. Sure. I understand that funding a position full-time is not necessarily in the cards, but I think it still does not meet the ordinance, and we have, as I understand it, restricted the position significantly to almost make it, redundant, and it feels as though it could be just a prelude, a way to say, well, we tried, it's not necessary, we'll tick it off the list of things we need. And I wouldn't want to see that. So I think those are my thoughts. Thank you.
Okay.
Wonderful. Thank you for saying.
Stephen, Dave, you were in the meetings where discussion was had about the position and what it would all entail. Can you talk about that a little bit? Review kind of what this person would do. Or maybe what they wouldn't do. What they wouldn't
establishing
do.
the Human Relations Commission hasn't changed.
Okay.
maybe part of what will occur through this year is some change or some proposal for change. The person would be the local contact point for any issues, concerns, having to do with discrimination, retaliation, etc. I think one of the things that we didn't talk a whole lot about is that the ordinance specifically is related to housing, public accommodation, and employment. And a lot of conversation had to do with what I call rude, crude, disrespectful, disparaging behavior, probably not illegal, but certainly those things. So I think that in addition to being the local contact point for what a person feels is a illegal act, I think it'll also be a local contact point to deal with behaviors, perception, attitudes, and that will be part of the outreach and education, and I think can feed into that. The other element that came up, and I don't know if it came out in writing in any minutes, an interest in the cities projecting a perception that it supports fair, equitable treatment of all people, that wants to eliminate prejudice, wants to eliminate discrimination. So again, I think it's part of that outreach and education. As it goes to the investigation, etc., we will rely on the Kansas Human Rights Commission that exists at the state level. I think the additional element will be a shepherding through the process. Yes, it can be done in computer, but I think that some people might be a little overwhelmed with that, and our position would be able to shepherd a person through that process. It would still be filed with the state. The state has the staffing and the people that are trained to do those kind of things. She is correct. We won't be following our ordinance as far as the local investigation, including subpoena power and finding of fact or cause, but relying on the state to fill that function.
And that was not stripped from the ordinance. The ordinance has not changed one iota, which there was conversation about possibly revising the ordinance. I want to emphasize that has not changed. I'm not a soothsayer, so I don't know what it'll look like as we are a year down the road, 2 years down the road. It might be a situation where we might ask that individual if they're capable to utilize their investigative, or if they have that wherewithal to do so. We're not there. We don't know. But I hate to use the word compromise, but I'm going to. It was a bit of a compromise, so to speak, because I heard a great deal from individuals that felt the position was desperately needed. But I also heard from a fair amount of individuals that said that it was redundant. The state's there. What do we need it for? And you know, how many complaints are generated in Hutchinson? And there's merit to that. But I've had conversations with others that, and we've seen it in real life, where people don't complain. In my own business, people just in separate sidebar conversations were telling me, you know why I do business with you? Because you're here. There's somebody to talk to. That's why I don't go to 1-800-INSURANCE or whatever the case may be. So having that individual, I think, is going to have some real power. And I think we, fortunately or unfortunately, we'll see the numbers bear out with some complaints and things like that. If that warrants the punitive thing, that's still within the guidelines of the deal. But I don't know that we should restrict who we hire to somebody who's only capable of investigating those things either, to start with.
And I would just add, probably the most important piece, I think, of this is the mediation portion. And if you go back in history when we had a full-time officer, that was the biggest part of that job. I can't remember that we ever had subpoenas issued, that we ever went to district court in any time, any case. Now, there may be some go way back. So now it was there, but the mediation, facilitation, whatever you want to deem that, determine, that's a big piece of it. Sometimes just getting an employer and an employee together, and it's a misunderstanding, and so to me that'll be a big piece of this job, as it was the former director was a big piece of that.
That answer your question?
Yes, it does. I do echo Miriam's concern about finding an individual of the caliber we need for just a part-time position.
And
that's going to be tough.
that might present itself early in the interview process. We'll find out.
Yeah, look at your applicants and go from there.
Yeah.
So we may have to re-examine this path if that happens, right?
I would assume, and I guess I don't know the hiring procedure for a human relations officer. Obviously, you're gonna you do personnel decisions, so we would defer to that. I don't know, is the Human Relations Commission involved in the interview process? Is there public hearing?
We haven't really talked much about that, but certainly they would be a part of that process. I mean, but it's like any department director position. There's a process, but we always involve different people in that to help make that decision. I doubt that it would be an interview with the entire commission, but be representatives from that board to be a part of that. So at least that's my thought. So.
And maybe as you get it down to a few qualified candidates or so, so it's not the whole.
Yeah, we'll see. It's like with any position, you'll kind of post it, and you can tell pretty quick whether there's much interest.
If there's zero response, well, there's your answer. We need to amend.
But you never know. There's some people out there with some skills that may be looking for something like that. So.
Okay.
Just have to see.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's somebody else.
Jesse.
Jesse Juma, 2708 Westminster. I just have a question. Let's say there was age discrimination. This is the department to go to still for that?
I do believe so. As long as it pertains to housing, public accommodation, and employment.
Because it's the Human Relations Commission.
Correct. Any discrimination, I think.
Exactly. So I just, bring back to the public awareness stuff. It's not just a race relations board. It's about being human. So anything with it, because, we hear about this silver tsunami that's coming along where the, we're all, the big wave of older people that are coming in. And so, it could come to even the, so I think one thing to realize about this position in this office too, people I think put a lot of to like it's a relations thing, which is a big component, but it's not the only thing.
Correct.
It's about it's a human relations commission. Remember that. So it could be age discrimination, it could be anything, but let's just remember it's a bigger component than just race relations.
I will miss some, but it's race, age, gender. Somebody help me out. There's about a half a dozen.
Religion, I think.
Disability.
Disability.
Or the protected
federal law,
classes.
basically.
Sure.
Having to do with discrimination. So it's all of those areas.
And so I just want everybody to remember that it's much bigger position. So yeah, maybe it does take into that account too.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you for reminding us. Anybody else? Further discussion amongst the council?
I might just say that I'm not willing to do nothing to get everything. So I have reservations about a part-time position, but I understand that sometimes compromise is necessary. I would hope that if we recognize that it's ineffective to have it as a part-time position, that we would be willing to reevaluate it quickly, sooner rather than later. So, but I do appreciate all the work you gentlemen have put into it. I know that's been a lot of meetings.
Very good.
Yeah, none of us has a crystal ball. We're just going to have to see how it plays out and hope we get a wonderful, shining candidate.
There you go. Exactly. If memory serves, we were moved, we were seconded, and we were calling the roll. If you don't mind, thank you.
Deckent?
Yes.
Dayline?
Yes.
Soldner?
Yes.
Yes.
Inskeep?
Yes. Thank you for everyone's input.
Okay, item 10B, consider final plat for Navarro replat.
Good morning, Amy Allison, Senior Planner. I just wanted to go quickly over why or what necessitated these next two replats. They're individual lots, and they were platted with what we call a platted setback, or a line drawn on the actual subdivision that says no building can be erected closer to the street than this. this line. Well, we also have a zoning setback, and sometimes those setbacks don't always match, and in many cases the platted setback is even further back than the zoning setback. So it creates a situation where the applicants can't build like any other lot that doesn't have a platted setback. And so you have seen similar plats, replats like this in the past, but I just wanted to quickly remind you guys why one lot plats are coming before you. So this one is the Navarro replat. The applicant is Mario Navarro. He lives at 3104 Mike Street. The agent is Dan Garber with Garber Surveying, and he is present today. So if you have questions for him, he's available to you. The property in question is located in the northwest part of the city in the Westview Addition. This area was annexed into the city at some time after it was platted and largely developed. So as you can see, there's no sidewalks, there's no storm sewer systems up there. The property owner actually did have a non-conforming storage shed that was in the platted setback. He went to take it down and actually expand it. And when he went through the permitting process, he realized, oh, I have a platted setback. We couldn't approve it, so that's why we're here today. So again, here's the subject property.
Which building is that on the drawing or whatever?
It's the one with the white roof. Again, this is a little bit older, so the new garage, he started building it before he pulled the permit, but it's essentially sitting where that white roof is now.
I'm still not sure. Is that on the north end there?
Yeah, the north end, where the subject property, north end. Right along that property line. It's skewed a little bit. That's not accurate. The property is zoned R3. The comprehensive plan land use map designates this as low density residential. And just quickly, you can kind of see there is sewer lines that are located along the southern border there of the property. Here is the final plat. It was reviewed by the Planning Commission on December 19th. Based off staff's recommendation, the plat and preliminary plat both met the standards of the Hutchinson subdivision regulation. And so we didn't have any concerns about that. And again, you can see they did put the location of that garage there along the north boundary line, and by removing it, that garage is now conforming, so it's approvable.
Amy, I just might ask, and maybe this is a question for John or Paul, what would we have to do as a council to allow for these replat approvals to be done at an admin level if they conform to all of our zoning standards or our subdivision regulations, so that they wouldn't have to go to the planning commission, they wouldn't have to go to the council? Seems kind of silly.
It's state law, isn't it?
It's not state law. It's not silly.
So no, there are a lot of state laws that are silly. I mean, I think that's 10 hoops to rebuild a garage when you already had a garage on that property. I think that's a lot of extra work for the city. I think it's a lot of extra work for the applicant. But it's a state thing, huh?
Well, and I agree 100%. I'd love to be able to say, hey, just get it done.
do it.
But
Yeah.
subdivisions, plats are pretty serious things, and by law, that's how it works. And particularly these plats that have been out there forever, and times have changed. But yeah, if there were a way, I think that'd be perfect.
No way we can just check it off.
Talk to Jason.
Okay.
He needs a new bill to introduce.
Well, and I guess I'm going down a rabbit hole here, but
well, we can look at it. I don't know. Yeah.
Well, would it only apply? Are these plats that don't mesh up well with our regulations?
I can probably answer that. Yeah, it is. It's primarily that. They've put a 30-foot building setback back in the 70s, 80s. Right. That was all the rage because people wanted to maintain, this clear sight line, beautiful lawns. Unfortunately, people either don't kind of go with the same guidelines nowadays, or they see, oh, I want to add on a little bit to the front of my house. The zoning regulations say I can go 25 feet, but they don't realize they also have a building setback of 30, so therefore they're kind of stuck. So unfortunately, It's one of the things when we did go back through and amend our subdivision regulations, we now discourage any new plat coming through, no platted setbacks, please, unless there is a significant reason for it. But like I said, it was kind of a fad, and maybe Dan can talk to a little bit more about that, but we don't really, advise people to do it anymore. So.
Great.
So as you open, this is exactly a platted setback greater than our subdivision
exactly.
codes.
And there's multiple reasons why you don't want a platted setback. As you guys saw with the R6, that front setback could change. Even if you set it at the zoning regulations requirement of the time, we could go back and say, you know what, maybe 15 feet is better than 25 feet. So just allowing the zoning code to do its job instead of, placing an extra line on a plat is probably the best practice.
Somewhat along the line, we're just doing one lot.
Right, this is one lot.
Item.
One lot.
Why aren't we looking at just the whole neighborhood? Because if there's others in the neighborhood, and I don't know, why.
Usually when an applicant comes in, because usually they're trying to pull a permit, we tell them, go and get your neighbors if you want to involved with this. You can cost share, and they're probably affected just as much as you are. But to be able to go through that, you need all of the property owners to be a part of this process. They have to sign off on the plat. They have to, be an applicant. They can't just be an innocent bystander. So.
Got you.
So it becomes more complicated, involves more people, et cetera, et cetera.
It's up to the applicant. They can choose to go out and contact their neighbors, advise them of this. But I think what we see mostly is people just move forward with their individual lot.
We had an example of that a month or two ago where a group, kind of by Sunoco or something, came together, a neighborhood. I don't remember what that was. But
that was the zoning change. So a little bit different, but
The
same
replat.
concept. We told them it would be better for your application if you contacted your neighbors, got them involved, and they did,
whole
and
group
it was successful for them.
that's right. Okay.
All right.
So what we're changing is the plat on the north property line of this.
It would, on this one, since it's a corner lot, it's actually on the north and west property
west.
lines. So here's the house that faces to the west. So obviously this is that area that is in a platted setback, as you can see there. And I just wanted to quickly say our subdivision regulations recommend installing sidewalks for this. Obviously, there's no sidewalks at all. This is a built-out neighborhood. So items like that, we with the Director of Engineering's approval, we waived them. So as you can see, there's that garage, and it would become conforming under the zoning regulations.
Oh, that was the building he began building. And, okay.
That's correct. All right, so like I mentioned, the Planning Commission reviewed this plat and the preliminary plat on December 20th, not 19th. There were no public comments, and they voted to approve the plats with a vote of 5-0. We did have 3 planning commissioners absent that meeting. And so with that, I'm happy to answer any questions. If you wanted to look more closely at the review of the plats, it's in the staff report that was in your packet. So. And Dan is here if you have questions for
I was
him.
going to mention any questions for Mr. Garber as well. He did travel.
He just likes to hang out with us.
Or do you want to make a point to say something
or
to us?
do you have anything you would like to add exactly?
I might add one thing.
Please.
You did a great job of presenting. Dan Garber with Garber Surveying. In times past, I think we maybe handled this with a variance where we reduced the building setback line. And I think a few years ago we determined that that's probably not a legal way to do it. So the better way is to just not just go with the zoning setback and not the platted setback. If we had gone with the zoning setback and he encroached over it, then you could have handled that with a variance.
Okay.
So this way we had to replat.
Yeah.
Very good. Thank you for addition.
Clean it up.
Well, with that, I'd move to accept and approve the recommendation of the Planning Commission to approve the final plat for Navarro replat subdivision.
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded. Please call the roll.
Deckent?
Yes.
Dave Light?
Yes.
Soldner?
Yes.
Cyrus de Carvalho?
Yes.
Inskeep?
Yes.
Item 10.
Sorry. Next item, please.
Item 10C, consider final plat for Sims replat.
Amy Allison, Senior Planner again. All right, so this one is the property is owned by Michael and Carolyn Sims. They live at 1600 West 22nd Avenue. Again, Dan was the agent, and so he can answer any specific questions you may have. This property is located in the north central west part of town, and it was, originally in the Meadow Acres addition to the city. Similar situation, there is a platted setback on this property. It's not a corner lot, so it's just on the frontage. As you can see, this property is again zoned R3, which is our medium density residential. And then the comprehensive plan land use map is low density again. You can see they do have water is in that right of way on the south end of the property, and then they have sewer along the north. No utilities proposed to be changed on this property, just removing that platted setback. Here is the final plat. Again, this, based off of staff's determination and Planning Commission's review, we felt that it met all the requirements of the subdivision regulations. And so here's some photos. I believe that this applicant is preparing to maybe add on to the house, and so they want that flexibility, and that's what's necessitating their application. Again, another neighborhood that was developed without sidewalks, storm sewer, so based off of Director of Engineering's recommendation, we waive that requirement. All right, and again, the Planning Commission reviewed both plats at the December 20th meeting. There were no public comments, and again, they voted to approve 5-0 with Wells, Peterson, and Bixby absent. So again, if you have any questions, staff review has all of the requirements. So.
And all the conversation we had about the last one applies to this one, essentially,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, good point.
I would move to accept the recommendation of the Planning Commission for further review, or recommendation of the Planning Commission to approve the final plat for Sims replat subdivision.
Second.
So moved and seconded. Please call the roll.
Deckent?
Yes.
Daveline?
Yes.
Soldner?
Yes.
Pyrus de Carvalho?
Yes.
Inskeep?
Yes. Thank you, Amy.
Item 10D, consider 2018 annual report for the Hutchinson Land Bank.
Good morning, Aaron Barlow, Associate Planner, and I have Sue Platera, the chair of the Land Bank, here with me. Every year the Land Bank is required to publish an annual report in the local newspaper showing their budgets and the properties that they own. We thought we would present to you just some of the successes and what's been going on here with the Land Bank for over the past year. And Sue will give you that.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Sue Poltera, 3600 Brigadoon Drive, and I am the chairman of the Land Bank. We also have another member, or we did have another member here. I thought I might address how we accumulate our properties on the land bank. We are in partnership with a number of agencies, New Beginnings, Interfaith Housing, and the city. We've donated some lots back to the city for parks. We did receive a donation from Interfaith Housing on Avenue A this last year. We're hoping to have some infill housing placed on these lots eventually. But the other way that we receive our properties, we go to the tax sale in October. I receive a list of the tax sale properties from Joe Sullivan, the county councilor. I review them. We only purchase vacant lots, nothing with houses or buildings. This year I purchased at the tax sale 4 properties. They're mostly in our target neighborhoods. We feel like we did well at the tax sale. We got 4 properties for about $1,200. So we try to be good stewards with our money and not spend a lot of money. I think it's coming up on the screens. The properties we did purchase this year, We have one on Avenue A, which is a very nice lot. I paid a little bit more for that one because I felt that was one that we really needed to have in the bank. There's one on East 7th on the corner. We have two down by the Cary Park, which I think also are good lots. So we go out and drive the neighborhoods and try to find good flat lots, big enough to build on. Try to find lots that don't have a lot of trees. However, there's a couple lots that we're going to have to take some trees down and spend some of our money. But I think eventually we'll have some good lots for infill housing. And while I'm here, I'd also like to thank the council for the money that you gave us for our budget for 2019. It is very much appreciated. And as I said, we try to be good stewards with our money and not spend a lot of money.
Good.
Thank you.
Sue, before
Yes.
you leave, or maybe Aaron's going to speak to it, the word up there says successes, and one that I think of, and I'd like for one of you to talk about, is a prior lot that the land bank used to own
Yes.
on 7th Street, I think it was.
Yes, I think Aaron's going to address
okay.
that for you.
All right, good.
Thank you. Last year, the land bank sold the property to Eddie Spellman on 8th Avenue. Address is now 635. He was able to develop that property in 2018. He built it and sold it for under $85,000. Wow. He said he turned a profit. That house sold very quickly. It was not on the market for very long, so short that I wasn't able to get a banner up there before the owners moved in. So that's an example of successful infill development. And this was before the changes to the R6 district. The property was finished before the zoning changes. And this is an example of what can happen in Hutchinson, and that there is a demand for properties like this, for homes under $100,000. I don't remember the specifics of the property. It's a modest home, and there's a need for these types of projects.
Very much so. There's a real void between what you might consider your starter home and second home, that I don't know, $70,000 to $100,000 piece of property, and it was able to be built for obviously less than the 85 it sold for to maintain profit. Yeah. Wonderful. It can be done.
He succeeded.
Yeah.
And we like to just hold this up as an example. And when people ask, well, why do we have the land bank? Well, we can help make this happen.
Absolutely.
Another success was the Southwest Brooktown Park. I'm sorry that it's bleeding off into the side. Through donation to Heartland Credit Union and working through the Hutchinson Healthy Neighborhood Initiative, all the partners there work together to make that a place that is worthwhile for the neighbors there. And the land bank was instrumental in making that possible and getting those lots and making them available to limited cost to the city and to the partners, so that the money could go towards the facilities there, the park and the covered picnic area.
My grandkids have enjoyed that.
Oh, good.
Nice park, very nice.
We do have plans in 2019. The biggest plan is to develop a strategic plan to kind of hone our marketing strategy. We recently got a realtor on our board, Josie Thompson, who has a lot of skill and background in that area that will be able to help, planners that don't have that same skill set, to be able to develop a good marketing strategy to get the word out for the infill projects like Eddie Spillman's. And is also we're working to coordinate with other departments in demolition and other areas to make the best use of the land bank. We are a tool for parks development, for demolition of buildings, to hold on to the land after that, for engineering for areas that have come into the floodplain. With those changes in the floodplain on the south side of town, we're available, and we want to be able to better coordinate with departments and making them aware that we are a tool to help them. And I think that's it. If any other questions?
Could you speak a little bit, Aaron or Sue, to delinquent taxes if I'm a property owner, and how that might work if I made a donation to the land bank?
So that's through the county. If you become delinquent, I believe it's 3 years, and you don't work with the county to pay to get a payment plan on your property taxes, then that will go on to the tax sale. And as Sue talked about, we are there. If that is a property that we would like to purchase, then we'll look at those and decide ahead of time that if it meets the goals. And that's part of the strategic plan to see, you know, where are those areas that really need.
What if I donated that property to the land bank before it goes to tax sale and there's still outstanding taxes?
I believe the term that Jim Gilligan uses, flushed. Those taxes are flushed.
Flushed.
Yes. I don't know.
Hand up.
So I can make a donation and no longer have that liability.
It would only be a liability,
or
correct.
responsibility to pay those taxes.
Yes.
And okay.
I also should add that once it becomes property of the land bank, it is exempt from taxes, and that's a state law. And then once it is purchased by someone for infill housing or for a donation or whatever, then it goes back on the tax roll.
Good point.
You had mentioned that you don't acquire properties with structures on them. Is that also state law or a choice?
No, that was our plan in 2013 when we established the land bank. And it's mainly because of insurance. We just don't have the money to pay for liability insurance
Then you're covering
with our
property.
limited budget.
Okay.
I think I'm trying to remember, somewhere up around Kansas City, they do put properties that have structures on them into the land bank, and then their goal is to sell them to somebody who is going to rehab the house or, basically flip it.
Right.
So
yeah, that's correct. That's Wyandotte County, but they have a lot bigger budget than we do.
Yeah, I know that too.
Sure. Well, and I was just thinking, top of my head, but those that we find on our demolition list, if we could pair groups, but again, that involves larger budgets and insurance and other things.
Yes.
I try to follow the demolition list, and
Well, sure.
like a recent one we're focusing on is on the corner of Jefferson and 6th Avenue.
I saw that. Yeah.
That we would like to. We're going to work with the owner there.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah. Very good.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for the presentation. There's more.
Yeah.
We
need a motion.
I did not post a motion in the presentation. We would need a motion.
Oh, that's right. To accept
There
it.
it is. Yeah.
Okay, I will move to approve the Hutchinson Land Bank 2018 annual report.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Please call the roll.
Deckent?
Yes.
Dave Line?
Yes.
Soldner?
Yes.
Tyros de Carvalho?
Yes.
Inskeep.
Yes.
Item 10E, consider legislative issues for 2019.
Mayor and Council, this is really just kind of a formal follow-up to the conversation we had back in November 1st with our delegation, where we listed out our kind of annual legislative priorities for 2019. And again, we're just kind of formalizing that for approval today. And just would, if you guys got any questions, I know Councilman Dave Line's got an addition he'd like to suggest.
Yeah, I do have one. I think council would recall that periodically throughout the, either Jeff or Brian come to us with the federal fund exchange piece as we receive that. And in years past, that has been reduced downward to, as opposed to $1 for dollar federal exchange, it was reduced down to 75 cents. Well, a year or two ago, KDOT increased that back to 90 cents. Which we were in favor of, and it's to the benefit of the city for that to be increased. And I don't know what that number is, $300 and some thousand.
Close to 400.
400,
Yeah.
okay. So what I'm suggesting is that as part of this broad policy statement on legislative, that we would add some brief language that would say recommend the continuing of the federal fund exchange program at its current rate of 90 cents to the local entity for each $1 in federal funds. And just to get that in place, so it is not overlooked as time goes by, that we're on record and our legislators understand and Kate understands that we certainly support the 90 cents rather than the 75 cents. So I'd like to propose to add that to this policy statement.
Sounds good.
Be in favor of that.
There was an administrative change within the last year or a year ago that knocked it down to whatever it was, 80 or 85, maybe 75. And then Governor Collier or someone, was it Collier?
Raised it back.
Raised it back up. That is in effect now, correct?
Right.
Yes, it is. Right.
So, John, you're hoping to kind of not
Just
codify it, but put a little more oomph behind.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that we keep it in the front burner, that what we support is the current 90 cents rather than in some proceedings there that it may be reduced back to something less than that. So that's all to protect our $400 and some thousand. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that makes sense.
I don't know that I want to include this, but I want to toss it out there, and Jade knows more about this than I do. And I think there was something in the paper within the last 30 days. Oh, come on. Don't lose
Land
the words.
contracts.
Land contracts, thank you. I don't know. I don't know if it's something we want to include as a legislative issue on our part, but I kind of rue not having brought it up earlier than today, but it comes to mind as we
what I'm hoping
spend some time on this
is
item.
Jason Probst gets co-sponsors,
Mhm.
and then if you get co-sponsors, it'll get a hearing, and then I'm hoping somebody from the city would be willing to testify in support of that. But as a junior rep, I'm not sure that
Of the minority party.
of a minority party, I'm not sure the kind of traction he'll get, but I'm really pleased that he's putting that forth.
Okay.
I don't know if that would be something worth discussing with the league, John, maybe next year.
Yeah, I think that, I mean, it hasn't, it's come up because well, just from what I knew here, but it hasn't been formally talked about as a policy change or anything. And I think even here, we haven't really vetted that whole issue out very far. I mean, the Housing Commission talked about it. I know Jade was there, and but I mean, I see some value to what's being proposed, and I think if we follow it, if it does get to the hearing stage, if it even gets there, we could then impose some input on at that point in time.
I don't see anybody from the Housing Commission. I know that it was taken up by the Housing Commission.
Mm-hmm.
My sense was maybe they backed off too soon rather than spending some time on it. Now, there are other issues they need to spend their time on, but that might be a way to address it further if they want to take it up and pursue it, especially if little or nothing comes of Jason's
I
efforts.
think ultimately it depends on if the issue presents itself in other communities.
Mhm.
Like if we're the only
Yeah.
ones with the problem, the state isn't going
Right.
Going to do anything.
to tackle it. Yeah.
Do we need to put that in some sort of official fashion as we accept the 90 cents with regards to the transportation piece, and then?
I'm not.
Well, I don't
think I
you're
want
not
to add.
offering
I
that
think
up, okay.
John has some language and probably.
And I've got
issue's
that
more
language
fit.
we can add.
Language, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm
Just
not
so
really
it's included in the statement.
Top of mind,
proposing or
but not
pushing it,
as-
but it came to my mind. I just want to have a little bit of comment about it.
Okay, very fine. With that being said, is there a motion to approve with the addition?
I would move to accept the legislative issues for 2019 for the city of Hutchinson with the proposed addition.
It's been moved
Second.
and seconded. Please call the roll.
Oops. Hold on here.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry.
I'm fast. I'm quick like
No,
that.
my finger slipped on this. Deckent.
Yes.
Dave Line.
Yes.
Soldner.
Yes.
Iris de Carvalho.
Yes.
Inskeep.
Yes.
Item 10F, consider city manager contract for 2019.
Paul Brown, city attorney, you have the proposed city manager's contract for 2019 before you. Has a 2% increase, which will be the same for other department level employees. We'd ask you to approve the contract.
No other changes from last year's contract except for the
Oh, I
2%.
noticed one little minor thing, the reference to memberships in the town club. We no longer have the town club.
Oh, that's
It's
gotta strike
interesting.
that.
Yeah,
Just a minor deal.
I forgot
I
about
didn't
that.
know.
Yeah.
I read it, but
So I need to find another club to join?
Yeah,
Yeah.
gotta find another club,
Yeah. We can strike, yeah.
Yeah.
Good catch.
Cheap,
John.
it's a cheap membership fee right now, so.
Yeah.
That's why I left it.
Any other discussion with regards to that item?
I'd move we approve the proposed contract for the city manager for 2019 and authorize the mayor to sign.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Call the roll, please.
Deckent?
Yes.
Dave-Line?
Yes.
Soldner?
Yes.
Tyros de Carvalho?
Yes.
Inskeep?
Yes.
Item 11, report of city officials.
I will start to my left.
Okay, great. Thank you, Dave. I had a few items. I was approached at Rivers Banks Park over the holidays. The gentleman who was curious about the progression of the disc golf course there. And I got to thinking, I don't know if we have our plans or our phases for the park on the website, so I really didn't know what to tell him. Justin, do you have any
Whether
input
it's-
on that?
I mean, it's there, right? Is it?
I thought that it was going to, or he thought it was going to be expanded.
Oh.
I'm not sure. I was just there for the playground equipment.
Good morning, Justin Combs, Director of Parks and Facilities. We do not have any plans to expand the disc golf. We are working on signage. Because
Okay.
if you haven't played it or played it with somebody who's played it before, it's pretty hard to follow. So we're working with the company to develop some GPS coordinates, or we had the GPS coordinates and then developing a map off of that. There'll be wayfinding signs for each hole, as well as like a large map as you walk in, so you know where you're at. And those sorts of
Perfect.
things.
That's probably what he was talking about.
Yeah.
How many
I
holes do you have
clearly
out
don't
there?
speak his language.
18.
18, there is
And
18.
each,
Okay.
and then each hole has 2 basket locations.
Okay.
So like for a tournament, they could run a 2-day tournament and then they could change the baskets overnight or something. So,
And what's the ETA on all that?
we just approved the proofs of the whole signs yesterday, I believe. So hopefully by this spring, we'll have them up and going.
Okay.
So it'll take a while to get them produced.
Great.
So,
Thank you so much.
you're
Wish I would have got his name. Hopefully he's watching.
Yeah.
Another thing I wanted to discuss is we've all read in the news about the dwindling down of the police department in South Hutchinson. Was wondering if there have been any efforts to reach out to them about a possible agreement to provide those services. Is that a bad idea? Provide those services, kind of like what we did on the fire department. I'm just talking about merging here, just a small issue.
I was going to say, I don't
Well-
think it's a bad nor a good idea. I think, but it's a conversation that needs had.
Yeah, I know the chief and the sheriff have commented, and I don't know the status. I mean, as far as I know, they still have a police department. So beyond that,
They do.
I don't know, but
Like 1 or 2 or.
Chief, you might,
3, I think.
yeah.
Jeff Hooper, Chief of Police. Yeah, they currently have 3 active officers down there. They have a sergeant and they have 2 patrol officers. They also have a cadet in the academy. We have reached out. We've personally talked to all of them. I wouldn't speak to what their plans are, but I would make assumptions based off of those conversations that those numbers will continue to dwindle. Sheriff Henderson and I have had multiple conversations about this, and our guys are commissioned through the sheriff, so if they do need assistance down there, we're going to be responding anyway. The sheriff just simply doesn't have the budget or the manpower to do that himself. Just this week, I don't know the exact numbers. We're tracking the number of calls that we are taking down there for them, but I personally heard our officers dispatched down there 3 times this week. So, I mean, bottom line is we're not going to leave the citizens unprotected, or we're not going to leave their minimum staffing. If an officer calls for assistance, we're going to respond to assist. So our agency is already taking calls in South Hutch.
And if that's occurring, then why not address the issue head on? With your background coming from a Manhattan, Riley County I'd be curious, and again, this may not be the proper location for it, but as we go forward, some of your ideas on how to that could be accomplished with South Hutchinson, Reno County, City of Hutchinson.
And certainly, I lived in that environment previously for over 27 years, and I would have some thoughts on some of the ways that we could consolidate those services to make it more cost feasible, not only for us but for South Hutch.
Sure.
I guess it all comes down to whether they're open to the idea.
Yes, ma'am.
That would be a big part.
It's unfortunate that we're going to bear the cost of protecting people that we're not receiving tax funds from.
Well, Jade, if I could jump in. I, and then Dave and I, had met with members of the South Hutch City Council. It's been a few months now. Not that we pursued it, and these are really pretty preliminary, but we did raise the issue of police and fire. Having seen that article, I think the mayor has some thoughts about maybe doing some follow-up and pursuing a little further and seeing if there's some interest, at least from the council members that could be met with. So,
well, that's great. I just think it's it's a prime opportunity. If we're going to explore it ever, it's probably the time to do it.
And during those conversations, there were other items that I won't get into at this point, but that the city of South Hutchinson we said, well, what is there that we offer that you don't, that we have that you don't, vice versa, that you can offer us that we don't, and try and identify those areas. The police readily represented itself. The fire department was a topic of conversation a while back as well. So I almost said the mayor, the former mayor is accurate. I have every intention of reaching out to the mayor of South Hutchinson to continue those conversations and see if there is some crossover or some consolidation might make sense. They seemed open to that. I know in past there's been a rift, if you will, but I think just through good communication we can find what works best for all parties. So thank you again, Chief.
Thank you so much. And last item, the former Eaton building. We have the building that Eaton currently owns, and then part of it was sold off, and that's the part that kind of we're having the issue with as far as when you come in that corridor into town and how unkempt it looks. Does the city have any recourse there? Are they behind on their property taxes? Are they not paying stormwater utility fees? And what can we do to fix that situation?
I've
Anything?
explored that with John as well from a prior complaint from somebody else.
They're paying their taxes a year at a time. Basically, they're 3, and then they're 2, and then they're 3. They're not paying their stormwater fee, and the property isn't. I mean, it's not a demo. I mean, it doesn't. Commercial property is a little bit different, and of course, we get into that. You want to try to talk about that. Got some. I think we've sent some weed notices over time. I mean, it's mow the parking lot, if you will.
The owner is not from Hutchinson. Doesn't own additional properties in Hutchinson, I believe.
Yeah.
So the recourse is
so we've got
challenging.
we've got some potential there. As far as I think we have to file a lawsuit on the stormwater because the issue there's no utilities, so there's no mechanism.
No mechanism.
But to be fair, we've got other properties just like that. We had one had a zoning case here not too long ago, and so if we're going to do one, we probably need to do them all, and that would be something we need to talk to the city attorney about how you go about collecting unpaid stormwater fee through the court system.
Well, and don't get me wrong, I don't necessarily care about the stormwater fees. What I care about is the property junking up a corridor into town and.
Well, we've had some conversations through the Chamber of Economic Development because we've got a project or two that's looked at that and that potentially not the building, but the land that it's on, and it just creates some problems.
Could we just sit down with the owner? What state does she or he live in?
I want to say Iowa, but I'm not.
Yeah, it's in Iowa.
Are they just too busy to be bothered with it? Or is there a conversation we can have?
Yeah, I mean, we can try. I can reach out. I think
we've sent letters, haven't we?
There's been, and we've emails and things. I can't remember the email I had with the individual at one time, but it wasn't anything what you're talking about. It was something totally different. Well, I know what it was. I was sending that contact to his contact to somebody that was interested in the building.
Gotcha.
But that's been some time ago,
Yeah.
so.
So how does eminent domain work?
There you go. All right.
Well,
Going
it's
there.
more than likely impossible the
I
way
know.
the code reads now, the way the statute reads now. I mean, this goes back to the Wiley building
Yep,
years
to the
ago.
Wiley building.
where,
Yep, remember
they
all
were gonna
that,
Do
yeah.
that, and taking of public property
For
private
private
property
purposes.
For a private purpose. I mean, there's a mechanism, but you pay like 3 or 4 times the appraised value. I mean,
Do you?
and I think at the time when that law changed, they made it really impossible
Yeah.
to use eminent domain, I think, for economic development purposes. But you got to declare it as a
Blight.
and I think we probably could
do
make
that, yeah.
case, but it's got to be for a period of time, and so.
It just seems like to me that the owner isn't maybe that concerned about it, and maybe if we had a conversation, it would lighten his load. I mean, he clearly doesn't care about the property, right? And there's no longer grain in it, so there's no revenue. So
Right.
Just
Yeah,
anything.
I would be happy to try to reach out. I don't know with what success, but yeah, but the individual does pay the taxes, I think, a year. I think he's 3 years and always pays it enough to keep it off
From going to the tax sale.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, just wanted to throw that out there.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's all I had.
Oh, wonderful. Okay. I don't know. Do you skip yourself, Steve, or do you chime in? What was the procedure? I've sat
Whatever
through
you
it.
wanna do, Mr. Mayor.
I guess that's it. It's up to me, huh? All right, fair enough. I just wanted to point out I learned a new term, silver tsunami. I don't know if Jesse's still around. He's already gone. I had not heard that expression before, but I will note that when filling out for a passport, which is expiring, I went to check hair color black, and readily had to change that to gray. So I guess I'm part of that silver swarm now. I wanted to welcome what I think is our newest employee to the city, Rebecca, and I wish you well in your endeavors going forward and all that. Other than that, Happy New Year, and here's to having a great new year. Steve?
Nothing, thank you.
John?
No, I have nothing.
Nancy?
Nothing.
All right. City manager.
A couple quick things. Want to introduce Rebecca.
Got ahead of myself. How about it?
Rebecca Starkey Kiesling, and she's our new director of public information, community engagement. And this is actually, she was on the job first day yesterday, and actually helped save me for a PowerPoint for State of the City for tomorrow. So I was having some issues, and anyway, but she's hit the ground running, and I look forward to some good things she can do for all of us. I really look forward to that. So. City Hall Day in Topeka, January 24th, and I'll email these out, but I'm going to pass. This is just the itinerary of that day.
The 23rd. I think it's the 23rd. John, check your date.
It's the 23rd.
23rd, isn't it?
23rd.
Okay, well, I'll hand this out next time when I get the date right, but it is the 23rd.
It'll be over with by
It'll be over with by that time.
Well, I've got the 24th date here, but anyway, so I'll get the itinerary coming out, and I think we figured out, Jade, you're driving up separate, and I'll have a van rented, and we'll leave from City Hall at. I'll send the details out to you. So, but a little bit changed this year. What we're going to do is get up early, get up there, and spend some time at the Capitol that morning. The league's got some things going on there. And then we can hang out up in the Capitol, maybe meet some of our legislators in their office, or maybe attend a few hearings, whatever the case might be. And then the league event starts back at the hotel at 2 o'clock, and then we've got our reception and then our dinner with legislators. So, and I'll send all the details out to you on that. So.
Did the invitations go out to the legislators, and
Yes.
were they able to attend?
We've got, I've got 3, 4 confirmed.
Responses.
Right.
Good.
Yeah.
Outstanding. Thank you.
And then Woody Seat Bridge, we've had, I know there's been a lot of concern about the condition of that, and we're up there this week. It's really kind of taken a toll here lately, and we're going to do some, I don't know, full depth's the right term, but some major pothole repair to try to hold that thing together until we get a decision going forward on what that project's going to look like. So, and I believe that's all I had. So,
very good.
Thank you.
The only other thing, and I'll talk to Justin and you about, is if I can get that that parking spot for mayor only.
Yeah,
and I'm joking, but I'm serious. We've got that bike rack.
You mean the bike rack?
The bike rack.
Yeah, okay.
I don't know. I don't warrant a parking spot. I'm kidding. But I know we have the bike rack, and I'm sure there's more pressing issues. But I park in back. I'm the mayor, guy. No, I'm just kidding.
Well, you usually park inside.
You want a key to the city.
Key to the city. That's it. I joke. All right. Well, thank you. Let's see. So then I guess that takes us to adjournment. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
There it is. And seconded?
Second.
There it is. Please call the roll.
Deckent?
Yes.
Dave Line?
Yeah.
Soldner?
Yes.
Pyrus de Carvalho?
Yes.
Inskeep?
Yes. Thank you. Thanks for coming.
We made it.